call from the Lighthouse. Mysterious powers that pull you closer to the forgotten sea. This week on Schedule for Launch, join me, Zach Walsh, as I talk with the fantastic creator Basil about their two upcoming projects, Pelogos and the Afrodyssey. Take to the Merci as a lantern keeper or an echo as you unravel those that remain there, or explore Homer's Odyssey through an Ebonics translation, right here with Basil and I. Welcome to Schedule for Launch, a podcast to discover the projects that you may have missed. This week, I am incredibly excited to be welcoming you all to the first episode of 2023, recorded at the very tail end of 2022 with the wonderful Basil. Basil, thank you so much for joining me this week on the episode. I am super excited to have you here.
I'm super excited to be here, Zach, and talk about everything and just hang out with you for a bit.
You've got a lot going on and some really cool stuff that's really unique and just super interesting. We've been in the talks, I think, since late November about trying to get you on, but I've been busy and sick, and now I'm better. So yeah. I'm excited to be bringing you on to talk about both your really cool game that's going up live on Crowdfunder in about a month from the release of this episode, as well as a very cool book, that series of books, poems, epics that you are working on in your spare time.
Yes, the Afrodyssey. The Afrodyssey that I have been working on technically since I started grad school, perhaps. So since 2013. It's been...
Oh my.
Yes.
Okay, it's a big one. So
yes.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit before we really dive into Pelogos and the Afrodyssey. Can you tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, definitely. So, I've sort of been leaning into this more as just a quick blurb about myself where, there's always that joke where it's like, hey, it's me, I'm gay. But yeah, no, it's like, hey, I'm Basil, I'm super queer. I punch Nazis. I punched so many Nazis in middle school. If for some horrible reason any of those people from my middle school happen to be listening to this who were former Nazis, I see you again. I will punch you again unless you've changed. Never doubt that. I am also, as black as the day is long, neurodivergent. All of my friends are always so shy about whether or not they think they're funny. I know I'm funny. And as I always say, I don't have unfunny friends, so all of my friends by default are funny. I'm also a Leo. I never shut up about that, which is probably just a super Leo trait. And I have a sibling who I also never shut up about. I was joking about it with Zer recently, actually, about how when you're supposed to talk about yourself, I will spend 90% of the time talking about Zer instead, because I love my sibling. I'm the younger sibling, so you can kind of also tell that as well. But I am a game designer, a game writer, and I am a sensitivity consultant. So when I'm not making my own games, I help make other people's games better. Not just games, I've done comics, novels, usually novels. I've looked over some people's art just to give them some direction as to, is this hair styled correctly? Is this appropriative? Yeah. Do you have resources about, X, Y, or Z? So I kind of just do all sorts of things. I also do some translation work on the side, not as much now, but I can translate for Latin and ancient Greek. And so, actually recently on Twitter, I did a thread to celebrate Hades 2 coming out, and I gave people who left replies Greek epithets. So that was a lot of fun. They were translated so that people could understand. I didn't want people to have to go try to find one of the ancient Greek dictionaries that are online, and then the tedium involved. But I was really surprised. I had at least 2 people actually change their display names to what I gave them, and I was very tickled by that.
That's rad. So Let's talk about that for a second, though, because I didn't realize this before, and it clicked once you mentioned it, but you study classical literature, correct?
Well, technically speaking, classics is classical civilizations.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the weird thing about classics. Like you tell someone, "Oh, I majored in classics." They're like, "Oh, cool. So like Shakespeare or, you know,
No, okay.
Mary Shelley?" And I'm like, "Oh, no, 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 no. The old dead dudes in Italy, like those and in Greece. Those classics." But yes, both my bachelor's and my master's is in classical civilizations, and my specialization is Athenian vase pottery. Specifically, I enjoy talking about black figure vase painting and the iconography within, and specifically the psychology of the other, which is, I will say, I don't mention this that often, but that phrasing actually came from my aunt when I was talking to her about my life goals years and years ago.
Okay.
And it really stuck with me as a way to sort of describe it, how ancient Greeks treated, foreigners, women, people of color. And so analyzing ancient Greek material culture from that perspective has really been illuminating, and I really wanted to dig into it more in my master's paper, but the professor that I wanted to work with was she was either on sabbatical or pregnancy leave. I can't remember because she was in the office, but she just wasn't available, which was a shame. So instead, I ended up writing about Circe and liminal spaces, which, it's like when people are at the gas station late at night and it kind of feels like you're there but not there. That's what a liminal space is. Or when you're waiting at the airport. So talking about how, the ancient Greeks saw the West as like where everyone goes to die and it's super spooky, and how Circe lives out there on the island and turning men into pigs. And I actually do have that section translated on my website as a snippet from the Afrodyssey. I actually did that for National Translators Month, which takes place every September. And so in 2021, they wanted to highlight translators of color specifically. So I took the time and translated that out, and it was actually probably like the most fun I have when I'm working on the Afrodyssey is after I'm done translating it from ancient Greek into American English, because then I can it's so much faster to translate it, obviously, just from one form of English to another, and it's just a lot of fun that way.
What got you into classics, though?
Okay, so this is a funny story. So, there's always that meme about neurodivergent kids, especially autistic kids, which I'm autistic, where it's like, okay, well, what was your special interest as a kid? Were you into dinosaurs? Were you into, Egypt? Were you into the Vikings? Kid Basil was into both Egypt, the Vikings, and ancient Greece and Rome.
Okay.
And from a very early age, I was also into archaeology. Originally, my master's focused on classical archaeology, but capitalism is horrible, and the costs of traveling to Greece when I was in grad school, especially while Greece was going through that recession and having some money issues, and at the time, at the college I went to, all the professors mostly focused on Roman works, which is not my focus. And I guess this is a little bit of like classics tea, but there is, I don't know if it's still there, and I really hope it's not. Current classics people, y'all need to be changing this. But there's this weird prevailing thought that like, if you're still into ancient Greece, you haven't matured yet as a classics person, as an academic.
I've heard that.
It's very bizarre. It happened to me at our usual like annual conference, where I was talking to this visiting lecturer, and she was talking about how she was working on these mosaics in the bathhouses of Rome, and I said, oh, that's not my focus, and I told her mine, and she was like, oh, well, you'll see when you mature a little bit. And I almost said out loud to her face, like, yo, what the fuck? But I was like, well, all my professors are here. That's probably not a good look. Because I already caused like a mild stir just talking about indigenous rights at the dinner last night. I was like, let me let me settle down. It's just,
I'm going to say too, as a person with with indigenous heritage, that was not an oh no to why did you talk about indigenous rights? So
oh yeah, no. I totally got the vibe that you were putting out with that. Yeah, so it's just, the costs were too high, and yes, they had a scholarship, but it was very small. And besides, I heard horror stories from the people who went to Rome and came back. One of the professors just like she was very strict, like while she was here in the States, and then when she got overseas, they said she just got even stricter. And I was like, yeah, see, I'm not gonna be digging in the dirt in the sun and then have someone try to, like turn this into some kind of like chain gang situation where it's like, like that scene in Holes, like what are we digging for?
I was just thinking Holes. I was literally just thinking Holes.
My mom would constantly make jokes about that. She's like, yeah, you want to be an archaeologist, you're digging for character. I have so many from undergrad. I have so many hot gossip stories of like black market people coming out to like dig sites to try to bribe like my professors getting temporarily or permanently banned from parts of like Africa or like Greece or whatever for refusing to play ball with officials at the time. It's just wild.
Yeah, that's wow. That's a lot. Well, that's super exciting, and that kind of leads us into a game that has some ties to that background and that interest. You created a very cool game called Pelogos. Did I say it right this time?
Yes, Pelogos.
Hell yeah. First time in this one. Okay, cool. So, can you tell us a little bit about Pelogos?
Yes. So the thing with Pelogos is it ended up being a lot of things. This was, well, because it wasn't a game I set out to make at first. The original version of the game was actually called something like Rise from Your Grave.
Oh.
Where it was going to be more of a solo thing or like a 2-player thing where one person was like a necromancer and the other person was like the deceased person who they were trying to resurrect, and you could only communicate through like usual supernatural stuff like the wind stirring or like ectoplasm left and strange markings, stuff like that. Because originally I started working on Pelogos, and I guess sort of like a content warning for like, death and grief and all that. But Pelogos was a direct response to my mother passing away at the end of March of, well, by the time people are hearing this, it'll be 2023, but it was 2022, which that was a rough period because the week before that I lost my job. So right after I was, oh man, like at the time, yes, it was very sad. But looking back on it now that I have a new job back with my boss who respects me and treats me like a human being, I'm just like, fuck that job. I will not name names. And I know they don't listen to this podcast, though when the episode comes out, I'm definitely going to share it with some old coworkers who were rad to me at the time. And to those coworkers, you know what job I'm talking about. And I still hate my old boss. Truly, truly a worse person I have yet to meet. And I hope not to meet someone worse than that boss. So, yeah, lost my job. And then a week later, my mom passed away. And on the one hand, being unemployed meant I could immediately go with my sibling to take care of final affairs, and that was a lot of drama, mostly from my mom's apartment complex. Fun fact, they tried to steal her car.
Whoa.
They tried to claim it was their property because it was parked in their lot. Yeah, it's outside my apartment. That's my car now.
Oh my gosh, that's nonsense.
That entire apartment complex could, honestly, that woman, I truly, truly wish a pelican would shit on her head. That woman, horrible. But after we got home, after we got home, outside of resting and eating a lot of Chinese food to try to cope and looking for a new job, which shout out to other coworker who might listen to this later. Thank you for hooking me up with that job so I could go back to my old job with my old boss. I don't even know why. I was just like, I need something to process this grief. And I knew from, in past events when family members would pass away, journaling is not for me. I would just get all sad and maudlin and just sort of don't go anywhere. And then I was like, well, I guess let me try to make a game out of this, which seems weird, but we'll just see how it goes. And so Pelogos it combines me trying to process the grief of losing my mother and my issues surrounding her family members on her side of the family, my dad's side of the family, my dad. But God, there could be a separate podcast about me talking about my father, but I love him, but no. Also, it was sort of just an attempt to just deal with my thoughts about the afterlife. And then as it moved away from that whole necromancer ideal, I started thinking about how, grief is such a heavy thing and it weighs you down, like when you are in the ocean and you don't know how to swim. And I was just reminded of all those times. So many times I have nearly drowned in bodies of water due to various negligence. Like, a story that I usually tell my friends when I'm complaining about adults being terrible is how I was put off from swimming pools for a while because I used to take swimming classes as a kid. And I got dropped from the diving board, as they're supposed to do, is like, the lesson to teach kids to jump off the diving board and swim and yada yada. But it was just, that was very traumatic, and it stuck with me. And I still kind of know how to swim, but I've had like separate situations, because part of the problem is I love swimming. I've taken aqua Zumba classes. I love them. I recommend aqua Zumba to pretty much anyone. But with my physical disability, sometimes that means my legs will randomly cramp up even if I'm having a good day. And when you combine that with the fact that I'm black and that people just kind of generally are racist, to be honest, that means that when I say, hey, help me, I'm drowning, they go, oh, nah, Basil, you're fine. So I wouldn't say I have I have a healthy fear of the ocean, like how people have a healthy fear of tigers. Well, some people don't, some people don't learn. I'm not that kind of person who's like, oh, let's go pet the tiger. Or my friend who I love dearly, when we were kids, tried to pet a horse that had a muzzle on because the horse was known for biting. And, nothing happened. Thankfully, my friend was obviously fine, and the, employee said, hey, stay away from that horse. But not all of us have that self-preservation trait. So Pelogos is sort of me combining death and grief, the afterlife, my sort of fears of the water, of drowning, of sort of that crushing sort of weight, and trying to process it. Like, one of the things I really try to put in all of my games is the importance of community. And in the case of Pelogos, what I really want to drive home as I'm working on it is, like most people, I really love the concept of found family. Like, your family is not just the people you were, related to and born into. It's the people you choose to be your family members. So, there's me, there's my sibling, there's several of my friends who I would definitely call, close family that I would definitely love to see and hug and everything. Yeah. And then, there's friends who are still in the friend category, but with time could become family. And so it's about how together, as a community, you can come together and sort of process that grief. But then I also wanted to showcase, like, what happens when you don't process that grief. Like, one of the denizens you can find in the Merci, which I'm a big fan of puns. So the Merci, there's a couple layers here. It is supposed to be evocative of the French word, merci, which is funny because as much as I love languages, I hate French. I will never learn French. I've gone on the record multiple times. I went overseas to France and just, no.
Couldn't do it. That's fair.
Nope. Got on the Eiffel Tower and I was like, all right, that's it for France.
As a Canadian, I get that.
Yeah. But the other aspect of the Merci is that it's actually a conjugated version of a Latin verb, which, if I remember off the top of my head, I believe means to be submerged. And so it's also a little bit of just the straight Latin, maris mare, or is it mare? Latin is a very strange language, but the Latin word for ocean or sea. And so it's supposed to sort of, have all of those layers together where it's sort of like this sort of gratitude, this ocean, to be submerged, like it will be submerged, that sort of thing. Because the Merci is the sea of dreams and innovation. In this setting, that is where people's inspiration comes from. Most people can't access it. Sometimes it'll show up in people's dreams, like normal people. But then there's people with powers known as lantern keepers, who are basically just kind of like it's kind of like if you woke up one day and then realized that you had an ability that other people didn't have, and then you sort of, followed the rumors and talk until you found this island with a lighthouse on it and realized, oh, there's other people like me who can enter this strange, dreamlike dimension. So, yeah, it's just the response I've been getting just from people playing the Ashcan, and when I did a playtesting session with just my friends, everyone is, I've just been really blown away by the way that people have been like, oh, wow, I love this game. This is great. I want to play more of it. I want to see more of it. It's just, I'm, always very thankful and appreciative of all the people who have left, who have said to me, this is great. I love it. And, people who download it, people who look at it, people who talk about it. And so, I'm just really thankful that people are, engaging with the work.
Yeah.
And, I'm trying to keep that balance of it being yes, this is a somewhat realistic portrayal of grief and helping people move on, because that's what the Lantern Keepers do. They have clients that come to the island and they want, maybe information about someone who died recently, maybe somebody who died in the past. In the expanded version of the game, there's going to be more adventures called Sea Stories that will expand out on the world. There'll be more about the NPCs. I'm thinking of adding a solo version called Researcher Mode, where you play as a researcher, and so I need to stat out the NPCs who will be accompanying that person, and that's more for if you just want to walk around in the Merci and look at the jellyfish and check out the frames of mind, and it's not focused on combat too much, though there will probably be an option for it, because I believe I'm setting that during the age where there's just a bunch of sea monsters. So yeah, my weakness is map making and chronology. It's funny, I usually get my sibling to look at my maps, and without fail, Z's like, this is not connected to anything, or where's the door? And with chronology, it's like, hey, you made a time paradox, which I just keep doing no matter how hard I try. And I do fanfic as well, and one of the upcoming fic has time travel, and I'm just like, why did I do this to myself?
Well, let's talk about those denizens a little bit more, because we've touched a little bit on the Lantern Keepers and what they do, but the predominant, I want to say, figures and enemies are echoes. And they're not just enemies, they're a little bit more than that. Do you want to talk a little bit about echoes, what they represent, and what they do in the game?
Yeah, so one thing I really wanted to stress, because much like, community actions, one of the things I really try to put into my works is, not everything has to be solved by stabbing it to death. I'm really a fan of, especially Undertale, where it's the mercy option, the non-violent approach. You don't have to go out of your way to be, violent.
Yeah. But,
I also want to balance that with, I don't want it to be difficult for you to be nonviolent. I'm thinking how there's a secret or a different ending for Cuphead, where if you don't attack any of the enemies and go through the stages, you get a different ending. And I remember when I watched that, I was like, that seems like an unnecessary barrier and added difficulty. I get the idea, but due to the nature of Cuphead and how frenetic it is, it didn't quite mesh for me. It's not the
best translation, yeah.
Yeah. So with echoes, echoes span various different forms. There are echoes that used to be Lantern Keepers who, for various reasons, are still in the Merci. One of the founders of the Lantern Keeper organization, Sammy Heathglen, for example, is still in the Merci, so that Z can teach new Lantern Keepers, the ins and the outs, and so Z won't be moving on anytime soon. My friend who was playtesting with me decided to be an echo during the Maelstrom Age, where there were, sea monsters, and so, to quote that friend, their character is still there to make sure that the current Lantern Keepers don't fuck it up. There are there are echoes who are there because they don't want to be forgotten, or maybe they have been forgotten, they were on the verge of moving on to the beyond, but then found out that, hey, you tore down my statue or something. Yeah. And so the people, the echoes are lingering for various reasons. Some echoes might still be hanging around because they want to fight people and they're just angry and refuse to move on. I wanted to really sort of capture the different spectrums of grief and why we linger there and why you would remain, and how grief and sadness and death and loss sort of like you leave these fragments, these literal echoes of yourself behind, and how, grief changes you and you're not the same person you were. I'm certainly not after my mother has passed. I still feel fundamentally still me. My personality is the same. My humor is the same. But there's also those like quiet moments where it's like, oh, I'm sad now and I'm, more emotionally vulnerable. I was just watching a bit from, well, actually, you know what? I don't want to mention that because that's a late game video game spoiler, and that game is still kind of new. But I was watching a very sad scene in a video game, and it had a death in it, and I teared up a little bit, and I was like, oh, this might not have been the best time to watch that.
Yeah.
But so echoes sort of fill different roles. And one of the things I really wanted to stress was not every echo is an enemy. Some just want to hang out in the Merci because it's fun. They don't want to move on. They want to explore and see more things. Like, to some degree, like I have them, I have them characterized differently. There are Tidings and there are the Submerged, but at their core, those two groups are still echoes. Tidings are echoes that decided that they want to explore this, dreamlike location, see everything the Merci has to offer, and hey, why don't you come with me? And, to some degree, Tidings are that notion or that idea, like when you're experiencing grief, you just want to distract yourself with anything fun. Like, I distracted myself by watching so many episodes of Kitchen Nightmares, just so many. It was just a pleasant distraction from thinking about anything that needed to be done, and instead just watching Gordon yell at people about their poorly handled kitchens and everything, but then also wanting to show people what you're going through, but in a way that's, they don't intend to be harmful. But, if you let yourself get swept along for too long, you'll forget what you were doing and, you get lost in your tasks. And so, at their core, Tidings don't directly harm your player character, but you can find yourself in a different section of the Merci if you're just like, yeah, sure, I'll go with you. Or, maybe you're down there for, several years when you were only supposed to be down there for a few hours. Not because, time moves differently down there, just because you were just having so much fun, everything slipped away from you. And then, at the other end, you have the Submerged, who are echoes that have just really decided to lean into their yoke, which is one of the skills that echoes have, which is the burdens that they had both in life and in death that are keeping them there, that are weighing them down. It's represented by chains. And one of the things I wanted to stress with yoke is that, you cannot forcibly put your yoke on another person, but I wanted, I'm hoping it comes through in the text that while, someone cannot unwillingly put a yoke on you, if you as the player character want to take on another echo's yoke, whether that's a player character or an NPC, that is something you can do. Yeah. You can, share that burden. At this time, mechanically, it doesn't do anything. That is something I am working on and puzzling over for the full game, especially with the feedback I got for the playtest for more options for skills. But, so the Submerged are just full of grief, sadness, anger, longing. One of the things I kind of just sort of pulled out of my cap of imagination while doing the playtest was, occasionally the Submerged just release bubbles that sound like people screaming and dying in a shipwreck. They're able to look at a person and see what their deepest grief is and sort of bring that forward to try to trap you down there with them. Yeah. So I do plan to also include some non-humanoid denizens of the Merci, because that's feedback I've gotten even outside of the playtest, and that is the plan right now. Based off the playtest, there's going to be, octopuses. I think technically it's octopuses, but
octopuses technically, but octopi.
I'm like octopi. Octopi sounds better.
It's your game.
But exactly. And so, especially because thanks to Twitter and somebody I am following, every so often I get the weirdest animal stuff on my feed. So lately I've seen stuff about the glass octopus, which is how it got in the game, stuff about whale sharks, glass frogs, and I think just today I saw a video of a oh gosh, what is it? A giant squid egg, and it was a lot bigger than I thought it would be.
Yeah, I've seen that recently. It's massive.
Yeah, massive and terrifying. And I'm considering something about crabs because I feel like if you do something with the sea, you know, you have to have you got to have a giant crab. But there's also, you know, thinking about how there are other countries that, you know, because people come from all over to go to the lighthouse to talk to the lantern keepers, how that works out, how the world, you know, is currently settling after dealing with all of those giant monsters from the previous age, because there used to be more lantern keepers, like, you know, they were, I'm not sure at this moment, but we can easily say like 300 strong, but after, you know, fighting all these sea monsters in the Maelstrom Age, they're down to about 5 people. And new recruits keep slipping out at night because they're creeped out by either their powers or the setting or just the nature of ghosts.
Yeah. So you had mentioned a little bit about not wanting to have everything resolved by punching it in the face, but there is a combat of sorts, and it's not always necessarily combat, but do you want to talk about how, and I use the term combat loosely, works in Pelogos?
Yeah, so the main core of Pelogos is, you know, you are a paranormal investigator, more or less, an underwater paranormal investigator is how I've been phrasing it, where you go and uncover mysteries and you can do research in the library to learn more about various echoes if they're already known to the lantern keepers. So when you're in the Merci and you find the echo you're looking for, you move into what is basically combat, but for the most part, right now the Ashcan just has a bare bones sort of thing for combat, but I do plan to expand it out further and make it easier to do sort of like cooperative attacks and sort of follow-up motions, and especially really flesh out like the move set for people who want to play as an echo, because they were sort of added as an afterthought while I was working on the Ashcan, and I was like, actually, yeah, you know, that could be fun. And then it's not quite as integrated, especially because a lot of echo combat doesn't mesh up because you can't use your yoke against another echo's yoke, so that just leaves you with basically what is like your magic beam spell, your yatter, or your like persuasion skill, which is yield. So when you run into an echo as a lantern keeper, just assuming your party is all lantern keepers, you know, the echo, depending on their personality, for example, for the tutorial, see story, Sammy, as I've characterized her, Sammy never shuts the fuck up. So Zer's Yatter score is very high. I think I have it set to like 8 out of 12 points. So primarily, Sammy will use Zer's Yatter to engage in combat with players. So they will just start rattling off random lantern keeper facts or how happy they are to see you. And so basically they're just doing psychic damage by never shutting up. And so as a lantern keeper, you can sort of defend against that using your divine skill. And so because you have Dawn, Dive, and Divine. Divine is for opposing any sort of yoke action, but you can also use it for Yatter or any other echo attacks. And so Dawn is primarily used for healing, but an interesting thing that came out during playtesting is one of my friends, for whatever reason, just kept using the Dawn skill. So, you know, it was pointed out that, hey, maybe this should have some other effects. And I did add one on the fly, but it's definitely something I'm considering outside of just it being used to heal. And so while, say, you know, in a 4-person group, maybe 3 of you are working to beat back the echo, and then the 4th person is using their dive skill to try to find out information about the echo, because echoes have 3 separate pieces of information. Their yearning, yester, and years. So their years are how long they've been an echo. Their yester is, you know, who they are, and their yearning is, why are they still in the Merci? Because every echo has a reason why they're still there.
Yeah.
And so, for free, Sammy pretty much just tells anyone Zer's name. So, really, you only have to get 2 out of the 3, despite the fact that, you know, the current Lantern Keepers keep telling Zer to stop doing that, because how will the new people learn? Z just keeps doing it. Z's just too friendly.
All habits die hard.
Yeah. And so, one of the things I am excited to do in the full version is explore more the effects of using your dive skill repeatedly, because I do mention in the Ashcan that there could be effects and outside of increasing just sort of like basically the difficulty, which is denoted by depth. But, you know, if your depth is like +4 versus somebody's depth, which is +1, you know, what does the Merci look like to you? What's going on? Can they even still see you? Are you on a slightly different frequency than them? That sort of thing. So once you learn all of those things from an echo, generally speaking, so far nothing happens. It's not like the echo disappears, but for the most part in the other sea stories, it's sort of like resolving their lingering regrets and why they're still there.
Yeah.
And so the echo, or the navigator, the sort of game master of the game, can decide whether they want that NPC to disappear, or maybe they just chill out, you know, maybe they stop being so cranky. But once you get that information, you gain experience, and when you return to the lighthouse, you know, you'll tell the client what you found, and if you have 10 points of poise, which is Pelogos' experience, you go down to the annealer, and then you level up. And I need to flesh that aspect out as well, and I'm very excited to do so, since I have a clear image of what leveling up looks like. Which is funny, it's actually, I have it more defined for what it looks like for an Echo to level up than I do for Lantern Keepers.
You know what, though, that happens, though. I think that's such an important part of design, is sometimes you have an idea for one thing, and you're really excited to implement it, but then there's another part, there's a flip side that you need to also make sure is implemented for fairness or balance. And I think it's also really important for us to mention to the audience that Pelogos is designed not just as like a one-off game. Like a lot of these games can be played one time. Pelogos is designed to be played over both a short form or a long form play if you really want it to be.
Yeah, no, definitely. Like the way I envision Pelogos is sort of being like one of those long campaign sort of things, but it can also just be like a quick pickup game you play with, you know, you and 2 people currently, but I do want to add that researcher mode, so it could easily just be like you and just you, going into the Merci and, you know, writing in a little journal about what you find down there and how it makes you feel and everything.
Mm-hmm. Basil, one thing that I do want to touch on, because you had mentioned this to me right at the start, and that is Crowdfunder and this game being on there. First of all, Crowdfunder, as you mentioned to me earlier, and for the audience's sake, is a newer crowdfunding website, and Pelogos is going to be going live there for its crowdfunding. Can you talk a little bit about when that's going to be happening and what your experience with Crowdfunder has been like so far?
Yeah, so Pelogos will be launching on Crowdfunder starting February 1st and running until, well, through the end of the month. In part because I think that gives me enough time to plan everything out, because this will be my first crowdfunding campaign, and also because February is Black History Month, and Black History Month has always been important to me as a Black and Indigenous person. And also because Crowdfunder is for January and February, doing their tabletop nonstop, where they're highlighting people who are part of that event, the projects that they're launching on Crowdfunder, and supporting them and everything. Yeah. So I'm really excited to be able to work and launch the full game, provided, you know, we get funded. I've already assembled a good chunk of the people I'm going to be working with. I'm always so excited when I get a chance to reach out to other people in the tabletop RPG industry and say, hey, do you want to work with me? And then they actually say yes. And
Super exciting.
yeah, and one of the things I'm also excited about is, I've funded several things on like Kickstarter, Indiegogo.
Yeah.
I helped fund one thing on Crowdfunder for a buddy. And so I actually reached out to that buddy asking them if they were cool with me putting their game in as a C story. So, keeping in mind that, you don't want project creep and you don't want things to bloat, but definitely one of the stretch goals is putting in a version of Oh Captain. I don't think it's a song of stories in the sea, but for some reason my brain is saying it's that. But it's Oh Captain by Leon Barillo. It might be Barrio. I'm sorry, Leon. But yeah, so that is a stretch goal. And I reached out to another friend of mine, Alex, who runs Great Glass Sword Games, and asked if I could reference their game in Pelogos, and they also said yes. So that is definitely going to be a fun stretch goal, along with researcher mode. I haven't exactly figured out the order of events, but I feel like probably researcher mode will be one of the earlier stretch goals because it is one of the things I want to do. But, having a chronic illness and being physically disabled, I do have to, measure my time carefully and pace myself. Yeah. And so I'm hoping to, with this crowdfunder campaign, expand Pelogos out from its current state, which is about 8 pages, to about maybe 20 to 30. It depends on how much I end up writing, stretch goals, how that sort of pans out. I will say that there are definitely plans for me to make an expansion book already, because I just really want to explore this setting, but I also realize that it'll turn into a bit of like project scope creep and bloat if I just include this ginormous section in the back that's like the history of the Lantern Keepers and all these NPCs and things that aren't directly relevant to the game, and let me just tell you about all of these characters and the chronology and the ages, and no. But it is definitely on a future planned sort of thing to make an expansion book, and I'm very, very excited for whenever I'll be able to talk and write about that.
I am very excited to see Pelogos go live on Crowdfunder and see how people receive that. But you had mentioned large scopes, and I wanted to talk about our other little topic today too, before we run out of time. We'll touch on it briefly, but you are doing a very cool project on the side, and it sounds like you've been doing it for quite some time. The Afrodyssey. What is this, and what can you tell us about it so far?
Yeah, so like I was saying, I've basically worked on the Afrodyssey. Technically, I've been translating the Odyssey partially for class when I was in undergrad. For a professor. Shout out to you, Professor Krause. You're awesome. I think he's out in Washington now. I looked him up recently. He has some students are doing a radio station or something. I don't know. The whole website is in Latin. It's very cool. But so I started there just translating it. And then at some point around 2013, both around the time that I actually actively got into Facebook and wasn't just sort of using my siblings' Facebook to talk to all of our friends because I was still in that, I don't use Facebook. I blah, 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 whatever.
Yeah.
But then I started actively using Facebook, and now I don't, and now I just use Twitter. But I, as a joke, translated a little bit of the Odyssey into African American vernacular English, also known as Ebonics, also known as OV. I've also heard some people just call it AAVE. I haven't heard any, I've only heard non-black people say that, so I'm not sure about the provenance of and the veracity of that, but as a joke, because I was explaining to one of my friends about how much of a hater Poseidon was to Odysseus and his entire journey, And so I've basically just been working on that on and off as I have free time. I had more free time sort of in grad school because I also have ADHD, so I would I would work on the Afrodyssey and then also take notes, and it worked out better when I wasn't writing fanfic and taking notes, because I also did that. But so I really started doing it more in earnest for, National Translators Month. And then since then, I started working on it a little bit more because I applied to this translators mentorship, which, fingers crossed, I'm still hoping that maybe I'll get accepted into that. I can't remember off the top of my head when people are supposed to hear back. But so getting back into it has been, an interesting process. It's been a lot of fun. Yeah. The thing with the Afrodyssey is that it takes a lot of time because I am translating it straight from the ancient Greek without looking at previous translations. So it's me, my own knowledge, my ancient Greek to English dictionary, and then putting it all together and occasionally consulting flashcards from my old textbook. And so having to translate the entire Odyssey, which is just so many books.
24
Yep.
books, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, it's a lot of books. It takes a lot of time. Like, just doing like 20 lines can easily take like several hours. And I'm certain as I work on it more, I'll maybe get a little bit faster. And the nice thing about ancient Greek, especially the Odyssey, is when they're talking about people, they tend to use the same phrases. So when I did the section on Merci, she was the gleaming-haired goddess with the clear voice, sweet voice, that sort of thing. So as soon as you saw the phrase, you're like, okay, I know who they're talking about. Like, I recently translated because I asked on Twitter which one people wanted to see, so I recently translated the scene where Odysseus encounters the sirens. And so still my favorite line from that is like, ooh, Odysseus, slide into our DMs. Because like the whole point of the Afrodyssey isn't just to like, it's like, oh, well, some of it is just, well, can I do this and still make this understood? And the answer is yes. It's not all just like, oh, it's fun and that's something I want to do. It's also because when I started working on it, again, when I took a leadership course at my first ever job in like 2017, that wasn't like a grad school, that wasn't like, graduate assistant job. And I presented it to the class. A black woman in the class, one of my classmates, said that she finally understood what the fuss was about with the Odyssey and was actually interested in hearing more. And so what I really want is to make, I really want to make classics more accessible to black people, because when I was both in undergrad and grad school and I would talk to other black people about it, they would just go, that's a thing we can study? They let us do that? And I was like, well, I mean, legally, yeah, they let us do that, but like, if you know, but what I really want to make, in general, like, I want to make things accessible for everyone, but especially this, it's a giant love letter to the black community. Like, I could go on a separate tangent about universal design, because I also have a certificate in museum studies, because I would like to be a museum curator. And so I can easily start hollering about universal design and how, this door isn't set up right, or, this ramp is the wrong angle, or even just, I don't think the right people were consulted when you built this. Like, the job that I'm at now, they just redid the elevators, but I noticed that unlike another building I was in, which was really nice, but these elevators, the speaker, like, if you needed to call someone, like, yes, they tested them and they work, but if you use a wheelchair, I don't think you'll be tall enough to be able to, easily speak into where it'll pick you up.
Yeah.
Like, your audio. And I was like, well, that just seems like a poor design choice. Or at my previous job, when they renovated the bathrooms to be more wheelchair accessible, except with the way that the door swings open, there's no way to get into the bathroom if you use a wheelchair, because of the way that it curves. It's just, it's very bad. And it was mostly because like the first floor bathrooms are correct and designed correctly, but then from what I heard, allegedly they ran out of money, and so they had to cut corners.
Oh,
but
no.
I'm sure they could have taken the money from some other departments that didn't quite need them. Wink,
Yeah.
wink, oink, oink.
Basil, I just realized something that might be kind of important, because I'll be the first to admit it. The majority of Scheduled for Launch listeners are very white. What is African American vernacular English? And how might that differ from other versions of Homer's Odyssey that they may be familiar with?
Yes. So African American vernacular English, like I was saying, it's Ebonics. It's as cursed as this is because it's incorrect. It's that trend of companies trying to package it all as quote unquote Gen Z slang. It's not, you know. Yeah. It's as equally cringe as when I hear white people trying to use it. It's the horrible usages of it are like that period girl, and just people just it's so bad. Every year I joke that for like either Halloween or April Fools, I'm gonna go around as the like Ov dog and just leave bark posts on people's tweets where they're just, you know, completely out of pocket. Like basically like Ov is basically like how, you know, most black people talk to other black people. Like it's just slang at the end of the day, but it is its own language. It has its own, you know, structure. It's its own vernacular. It's a dialect of English. So, you know, it's sort of like, you know, it's like how when people talk about like code switching, like you're at work and you're talking to your white coworkers and you'd be like, oh, hi, Susan, how are you? Are you having a good day? But then, you know, you see your black coworker and you'd be like, hey, what's good, man? What's going on? How's it hanging? You know, what's good with you? You good? Are you good? Like, that's probably like the best, actually, that's probably the best example of is asking someone, you good or you good? Because that just has so many different connotations. And, you know, there might be a black person who's like, hey, man, don't be giving them the recipes to stuff. But in this, just this one example, you know, you good or you good is asking like, you know, are you doing all right? Are you not doing all right? Is everything good? Are you really good? Or are you just trying to get through it? It can also be asking, hey, is that white person being really racist to you? Do you need support in this moment? Yeah. So, you know, and this is a funny story. So at my last job, I learned about this recently. Apparently some people say that they're out of pocket when they're unavailable. I did not know this because with Ov, when you say that you're out of pocket, that means, well, it means you're wildin'. It means you're acting up. You're acting a fool, a clown.
Yeah.
You're basically just being, you know, disrespectful.
That's what I always took it as. So.
Yeah, so my last boss kept apologizing to my coworker, and she was like, oh, I'm so sorry. I've just been so out of pocket lately. And I had to try very hard not to laugh because my cubicle was next to hers. And so it'd be very obvious what I was laughing at. But then also because that boss was severely out of pocket, just wildest woman I have met in a long time. But she just... But yeah, so it's kind of funny. And so I was like, boy, I hope no one ever really tells her the other meaning for that. And it just ended up being real funny.
Little treat. It's a special little treat.
You know, like one of the ways, like I do try to reference that in other ways. One of the things I'm bad at is making monster stat blocks. And so for fun, I ended up making a monster called Boo Boo the Fool. Because that's pretty much the refrain of like any sort of black mom and probably also just any mom of color, honestly. And just the clown had attacks like, you know, you got Faerun money, or my other favorite, you smelling yourself, which is, Honestly, you don't hear that much among like probably like my age bracket, like 30s. That's really more of an older black person kind of thing, because it's just like, what wait what are you talking about?
Oh, that's amazing.
So I have it floating around somewhere on one of my folders, but because I'm still working at it and I've got to tweak it. I'm just numbers. But yeah, I was really proud of of making that particular character. And then I think like the physical attack for it is like hush up and sit down or something.
I've definitely heard friends' moms say that to them. So
like, you sitting over there acting like you grown.
Yep.
The constant refrain, though, of like, you got McDonald's money, you got Taco Bell money, you got Burger King money, you got Panera money. And then when you do, it's always, oh, you got it like that then? All right, matter of fact, let me hold on to a little bit. Let me hold on to a lick. Let me get a lick. And then it's just like, then they take all your money, just all your mom. Why? My mom was notorious for doing that. I hated it. I sold candy in high school and was making a good amount of money, and I was actually going to expand out into selling sodas out of a locker my friend wasn't using, but my mom just kept taking too much. Which apparently I found out later was my mom's gentle way of trying to get me to stop selling candy. Why she didn't just tell me, I have no idea. She was just like, I just thought this was the better option.
That's amazing. I love it. That's so funny. And like a really good way to talk about Ebonics to this audience base for the most part.
Yeah, the main thing to take away from Av is like, if you think it's just like some fun, quirky thing that came from nowhere, or a phrase that needs to die, or, actually, if I could get on my one gripe point about, not about Av, but about other people's usage of Av. With Among Us, everyone is always talking about, oh, that person's sus, that person is sus, 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 sus. And so it's just, for me personally, like, sus means, it's like, it's a homophobic slur, fam. Like,
oh.
Yeah, that's
the
wild thing. Yeah, see, that's the wild thing. Like, if you don't know, then you don't know. But if you know, you know. And so I haven't seen it come up in a while. Like, the last time I saw it was like when I was still on Tumblr and people were porting over Twitter posts where someone was complaining about people posting porn of Isabella the dog from Animal Crossing, just saying like, oh man, you people are sus AF. And so I was like, yeah, well but yeah, so the fact that like, there's all the people playing Among Us and it's like, oh, red sus or yellow sus, and I'm just like, nah, that ain't it for me. Like, to quote somebody else I follow on Twitter, when they were like, yeah, no, we playing Among Us, but I don't do none of that sus stuff. You say that, you're gonna get out of my game. I don't have that at my game. Like, if I was hosting a game of Among Us, that would be one of my rules, because I don't want to hear that, because it just makes me think of like all those years of like people like, other black people, my dad, just random people talking about, oh, that person's sus or that person's a sissy, or just yeah, it's just terrible. And so every time I bring it up, people are like, oh, I didn't know that. And I'm like, yeah. Or, you've got those like sea lion people on Twitter who are like, oh, do you have a source? And at this point, it's like, man, I'm the source. Shut up. Like, endlessly debating people about what's racist and what's not is a waste of time. And so, obviously at the end of the day, I'm not going to kick in your door and be like, hey, don't use this. You're a horrible person if you use it. I'm just saying, for me personally, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to see it. And usually when I see it, like in Discord chats or whatever, I just scroll past it and move on. My problem is like on a minor level, also when people use 8 incorrectly, like for fun, I follow like the Av Struggle Tweets Twitter. Shout out to them, y'all rock. But they share all these like tweets of Av being used so incorrectly. When there was one where it's like, oh yeah, they totally ate. I don't even know. The problem with trying to quote the struggle tweets is like my brain keeps correcting it to the correct way to use it. Like, I think they were like they ate her to pieces or something. I'm like, what? No, you. It's like, yeah, she ate and left no crumbs. Like I don't know, you know. Like that's just a minor thing where I'm just like, you know, I'm just like, if you're gonna take the time to steal the language, you could at least pay attention.
Basil, I've just realized that pre-editing before this, we are hitting our hour mark, so we kind of got to start wrapping it up here. This has been amazing. But
yeah, I'm down.
Yeah. I got two more questions for you. One a little bit shorter, and one I think we're gonna get a great answer from, and then you can plug yourself. That's the last one. So, first question before we finish up here: what advice can you give to creators who are wanting to start creating something, but they're not sure where to start?
Well, I actually got my. I laugh because this is gonna sound. I'm not embarrassed because, you know, it is what it is. I got my start writing fanfic. Like, I think my very first fanfic was a Yu-Gi-Oh fanfic. Oh,
really?
Gosh. Yeah, I think, what was the, I think it was Seto Kaiba and Yugi Moto.
Okay.
Like, I got my start writing fanfic, posting on Gaia Online, you know, posting on forums talking about Avatar: The Last Airbender. So,
Yeah.
I think one of the nice things of being like a 90s kid and before social media really took off, and people have talked about this on Twitter, is the fact that, you know, you can just be posting just about anything on forums, and those forums are likely gone. No one remembers you. No one will remember your cringe phase. And like now it's like, oh no, we have a recording of you writing, you know, My Immortal or whatever. But, you know, even with that, I say do it anyway, you know. Write that self-insert story of you dating Seto Kaiba. Write that story about, you know, you hanging out with Aizawa Sensei from My Hero Academia. Like, just live your best life as best you can and just go out there and make stuff. Like, I got my start in terms of, like, tabletop role-playing games. Like, I started with the Write Your Own Adventure course from the Storytelling Collective, Storyco, I think is their Twitter handle.
Storyco.
Yeah. And that was November of 2021. And I could not think of a single adventure to write, but then I happened to be eating a bag of Miss Vicky's potato chips, and the description, I don't know if you've read the description on the back of those chips.
Wild.
It's creepy. And I was like, that sounds like some kind of eldritch nonsense. And so that's how I wrote my first D&D adventure, which I want to go back to at some point and improve because it really shows its age. But then from there, it was a series of just people taking a chance on me and letting me write these wonderfully weird stories, as I'm always talking about. And then at some point I thought, hey, actually, maybe I could make my own game. Sure, I have dyscalculia, which means all the numbers move around in my head, but I'm sure someone else will notice if the math is off, aka my sibling and kind people on Twitter. So I just sort of jumped in with very little knowledge. You know, I've played a little bit of D&D, a little bit of Pathfinder, and then I was like, yeah, no, I'm ready to make my own games. No one's gonna stop me. It's the internet, you know. Just It's like, what are you, a cop? Are you gonna tell on me? So who are you gonna report me to? I'm just like, it's, you know, we're not still in the wild west of the internet, and I don't think really that ever truly existed. But I'm just like, you know, like as I say to people, the only person stopping you is you, with of course the obvious caveat of not you terrible grognard who's out there trying to like recreate slavery or some shit in your stupid game. I'm not talking to you. I'm absolutely not talking to you other than to say you are a terrible person and that's a horrible idea. So yes, the only person stopping you is me. I am gatekeeping. Get out. But like, you know, if you want to make like say you want to make a game about mice, you know, making a meal. I followed someone on Twitter whose Twitter handle is escaping me. I'm so sorry, friend. But they made a mouse game. Another person I follow on Twitter, Monroe, has a game that's based off Great British Bake Off called Candied Violets. You know, just whatever you want to make, you can go out there and make
You
it.
can do it.
You know, like there's Honey Heist is out there. You're a bear. You know, like I'm technically working on a board game where you're a bear trying to sleep in a house, and other players are like the beleaguered human tasked to try to remove you. And so, like I'm just like just get weird with it.
I'm into it. I love it. Basil, where can people find out more about you and your upcoming work?
Yeah, so I know with Twitter being kind of gestures vaguely and everything being on fire,
It's a hellscape, but it's the hellscape you can find me in.
yes, you can find me on Twitter until it burns down to nothing, honestly. Like everyone's like, "Oh, I've moved to Mastodon or Hive or Inkblot or I don't know, Bloopy Bloop or whatever." And I'm like, "No, like not to sound like an elder millennial, but it's like I'm here. I don't want to leave."
I swear I'm gonna die.
Yeah. So you can find me on Twitter at Kobanya. I think it's underscore Kana. I want it to be just at Kobanya, but there is still someone for years squatting on the handle. And at this point, I don't really trust being like, hey, they haven't posted since like 2013. Can I have this? I don't trust current management. I'm also on Pillow Fort as Kobanya. So got in early on Pillow Fort. It's a pretty cozy vibe. I'm also on Tumblr. I actually, my first social media was basically Tumblr. You know, I always joke about it, but I have a shit posting blog. I don't advertise the shit posting blog anymore as I used to. But if you find it, you know, have fun. Peruse the shit posts. I used to make every single day. I made a shit post a day, every day, to go live during people's lunch breaks. I don't know where I got the energy for that, to be honest.
That's fucking wild.
Yeah, there was just...
I tried to schedule tweets for a week, and I was ready to just be like, I quit.
It was, like, looking back on it, I'm like, what was my output? Why was I doing this? Like, it was just... And, like, I think at that time, too, I was also juggling being half of the team behind an Ask blog for the character Krang from the 2012 version of TMNT that I shared with my sibling. Oh. So I guess my brain was not getting enough stimulation. So yeah, I'm on Tumblr and Pillow Fort as Kobanya. I'm on Twitter as at Kobanya Kana with an underscore between Kobanya and Kana. And then there is always my website, towerofbasil.wordpress.com. Possibly in the coming new year, I might finally shell out some money, so it's just Tower of Basil, but we'll see. I'm kind of cheap on that front because I don't really think it's that big of a deal, but
for sure.
I'm working also on a newsletter. I have made no progress on that newsletter. I've been busy with so many other things. And you can't find the newsletter on my website yet, but it'll be there once I finally have enough material so people can subscribe to it. And I think that's all the places you can find me at. Although for some reason my brain was like, you know, you're also on Candy Crush, and I'm like, Candy Crush is not a social media website.
Not social at all.
If you too would like to live out your 40-year-old mom vibes, come join my team on Candy Crush. Like I downloaded it to kill time, and then it's never left my phone.
As always, audience, Basil's links are going to be down in the description below. Go check out their work. Pelogos is so cool. Basil, thank you so much for joining me on the show this week to talk about both Pelogos and the Afrodyssey. This was amazing. I'm glad that I could have you as the start to 2023. It's been a lot of fun.
Yes, I'm very excited for what 2023 has to offer. I made a tweet like earlier in October or November or so saying that, you know, I really feel like 2023 is going to be, you know, my year, the year where I really get weird with it. I'm just going to dig deep and get back into the really autistic version of myself I used to be as a kid. Super weird, touching everything with my gay little hands.
I look forward to seeing how that goes. And audience, thank you so much for joining us this week. Basil and Pelogos are scheduled to launch very soon on Crowdfunder, So go out there, check them out, back this game. It looks super cool. The ash can is rad. Basil, once again, thank you for joining me. Until next time, everybody, though, take care of yourselves. I'll see you on the next one. Bye. Once again, thank you so much to Basil for joining me this week on Schedule for Launch and being our first guest of 2023. It was a stellar conversation to start the year with, and aside from that one horrifying audio glitch that I could only do so much to fix, may have been one of the best ways to start. Pelogos is going to be going on Crowdfunder in February, and I'll let you know once it goes live. And hey, thanks for joining me this year. I hope you all had a safe and wonderful holiday. There's a lot of amazing content coming down the pipeline, and once you know it, I'm hoping I can help you all out here. The tabletop gaming space is a little on edge right now due to a certain very large game changing up its licensing agreement, so we may or may not need to adjust things down the line with some episodes coming out, but I'll let you know if that happens. Thank you all so much for joining me, though. 2023 is going to be a kick-ass year for us, and I hope to have you along for the ride, so thanks for listening. We're scheduled for launch, and I hope to see you out there. Bye.